Sheriff Tom Walker parked his patrol truck near the county courthouse. A sleek black sedan pulled into a parking spot just ahead, and out stepped a poised black woman in a sharp, tailored suit. She moved with purpose, her leather briefcase swinging lightly at her side. Sheriff Walker's eyes narrowed as he observed her. She didn't fit, he thought. Not here, not now. Adjusting his Stetson, he stepped out of his truck and called out loud enough to catch the attention of passers-by. "Ma'am!" he barked, his tone laced with suspicion. The woman stopped and turned, her expression calm but curious. "Yes, Sheriff," she replied, her voice steady. "Do you know you're parked in a restricted zone?" Walker gestured toward her car, the words dripping with authority. She glanced back at her vehicle. "I'm here for official court business, I won't be long," she explained evenly, continuing toward the courthouse steps. Walker wasn't satisfied. "Official business, huh? Mind showing me some ID? And while you're at it, pop open that briefcase for me." She turned back to face him fully, a flicker of incredulity crossing her face. "My ID? My briefcase?" "Sheriff, I fail to see why that's necessary," she said, standing her ground. Walker folded his arms, his stance unyielding. "Look, ma'am, either you cooperate or we can sort this out down at the station. Your choice." The surrounding pedestrians began to slow, curious about the commotion. Some quietly pulled out their phones, the lenses discreetly aimed at the unfolding scene. With a measured sigh, the woman reached into her bag, retrieved her ID and handed it over. Walker barely glanced at it before pressing again, his voice gruff. "What's in the briefcase?" "Sheriff, I'm not opening my briefcase for you," she said, her voice firm. "And frankly, this entire interaction seems unwarranted." She stepped forward to move past him, but Walker blocked her path. "Late for what exactly? Something shady, I'd bet," he sneered. Her phone buzzed in her hand and she answered it without hesitation. "Hello, Chief Bailey. This is Judge Erica Johnson. I'm standing outside the courthouse being detained by one of your deputies for no apparent reason." The words, Judge Erica Johnson, hit Sheriff Walker like a lightning strike, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Oh, a judge, huh?" he said, his tone mocking. "That's a new one. Got any other tall tales you'd like to tell?" The small crowd began to murmur, the tension in the air thickening. Moments later, the distant sound of screeching tires drew everyone's attention. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb, and out stepped a tall, imposing figure in a crisp uniform. It was Chief Bailey himself. Chief Bailey's expression was unreadable as he approached the pair. "Sheriff Walker," he called out sharply. "What's going on here?" Walker stiffened but held his ground. Caught her parking in a restricted zone, seemed suspicious, so I asked for her ID and to inspect her belongings. She's refusing. The chief turned to Judge Johnson, his demeanour shifting immediately to one of respect. "Your Honour, I sincerely apologise. Are you all right?" Judge Johnson gave a curt nod. "I'm fine, but this behaviour is unacceptable. Sheriff Walker escalated this situation with no probable cause." Sheriff Walker's face paled as the gravity of the situation sank in. "Your Honour," he began, but his words faltered. The chief's tone was unrelenting. "Judge Erica Johnson, our state's newest federal appointee, the same person you've been harassing for the past 10 minutes. Walker opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. The gathered crowd began to buzz with whispers, their phones capturing every moment. "This department does not tolerate such conduct," the chief continued. "Sheriff Walker, consider yourself suspended pending investigation. Hand over your badge and firearm." Gasps rippled through the onlookers as Walker reluctantly obeyed, his face a mask of disbelief. Judge Johnson adjusted her blazer and addressed the chief one final time. "I trust this matter will be addressed thoroughly?" "Absolutely, Your Honour," Chief Bailey replied, his voice solemn. With that, Judge Johnson ascended the courthouse steps, her dignity unshaken. Walker was led away by another deputy, his career in shambles. The crowd began to disperse, their murmurs filled with a mix of satisfaction and hope. For Sheriff Walker, It was a day he would never forget. For Judge Johnson, it was a stark reminder of the work still to be done to ensure accountability and justice for all. As Sheriff Walker was escorted away, the murmurs of the onlookers grew louder. Conversations buzzed with shock, anger, and a hint of satisfaction. Some recorded videos of the scene, their cameras catching every moment of the sheriff's fall from grace. Judge Johnson, standing tall despite the emotional toll of the encounter, glanced at the crowd. She saw more than just curiosity in their eyes. There was hope, a yearning for justice and accountability. She knew this moment carried weight far beyond her personal experience. It symbolized a struggle for equity and fairness that many had fought for generations. A young man in the crowd, holding a Justice for All sign from an earlier protest, called out, "Thank you, Judge. It's about time people in power face consequences." His voice carried a mix of relief and defiance. Others nodded in agreement, while a few exchanged knowing glances as if to say, "Finally, someone stood up to the system." Judge Johnson adjusted her blazer and turned to the deputy who had intervened on her behalf earlier. "Deputy Harris," she said, her voice steady, "thank you for stepping in. It's not easy to challenge authority, especially within your own ranks." Harris looked down, almost embarrassed by the acknowledgement. "Just doing what's right, Your Honor," he replied. "I couldn't stand by and watch that happen." As the crowd began to disperse, Judge Johnson found herself lost in thought. The courthouse steps, a place she had walked countless times, now felt like a stage where justice had been publicly tested. She thought about the systemic issues that allowed individuals like Sheriff Walker to act with impunity. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a much larger problem. Her mind wandered back to her years in law school, where she had studied landmark civil rights cases. She remembered the stories of those who had endured far worse and fought far harder, laying the groundwork for her to stand where she did today. If they could persevere, she thought, then I can't let this moment pass without action. She resolved to use her platform to push for more comprehensive police reform. She envisioned a task force dedicated to addressing misconduct and fostering better community relations. This can't just be about one man losing his badge, it has to lead to lasting change. Meanwhile, in the back of the deputy's car, Sheriff Walker sat in stunned silence. The realization of his actions and their consequences was starting to sink in. His thoughts raced as he replayed the encounter in his mind. How did this happen? He wondered. He had always prided himself on being in control, but today he had let his biases dictate his actions. He thought about his career, the years he had spent climbing the ranks, and how it could all come crashing down because of a single careless moment. Walker's pride fought against the gnawing guilt in his chest. He tried to rationalize his behavior. I wasn't targeting her. It was just protocol, he told himself, though deep down, he knew better. The sight of a confident black woman in a position of power had triggered something in him, something ugly that he didn't want to admit existed. For the first time in years, Walker felt small, powerless. He realized that the authority he had wielded for so long could just as easily be stripped away. The thought terrified him. As news of the incident spread, the courthouse square became a hub of discussion. Local activists saw an opportunity to push their agenda forward. A woman with a clipboard approached groups of onlookers, collecting signatures for a petition demanding greater oversight of law enforcement. "This is our chance to hold them accountable," she said passionately. "If we don't act now, this will just be another story swept under the rug." Nearby, an older man shook his head. "It's not just about this sheriff," he said to a younger man beside him. "It's about a system that's been broken for decades. One suspension isn't going to fix that." His words resonated with many. Conversations turned to personal stories of discrimination and encounters with law enforcement. The square became a place of shared experiences, a reminder that the fight for justice was far from over. The following morning, headlines blared across news outlets. Sheriff suspended after detaining federal judge without cause. Social media was ablaze with videos of the incident, and hashtags like "I'm Justice for All" and "Trust End Police Bias" trended nationwide. Judge Johnson watched the coverage with mixed emotions. While she appreciated the public outcry, she worried about the lasting impact. Would this truly lead to meaningful change, or would it become just another viral moment, forgotten in a few weeks? Her phone buzzed with messages of support from colleagues, friends, and even strangers. One message stood out, a heartfelt note from a young law student who wrote, "Seeing you stand up for yourself inspires me to believe I can make a difference too. Thank you for showing us what courage looks like." Johnson smiled, her resolve strengthened. "This is why I do what I do," she thought. A week later, a press conference was held outside the courthouse. Chief Hendricks, Judge Johnson, and community leaders stood side by side. The chief announced a full review of department policies and the formation of a civilian oversight board. "We cannot allow incidents like this to define us," Hendricks said. "We must learn from our mistakes and work toward a future where every citizen is treated with dignity and respect." When it was her turn to speak, Judge Johnson addressed the crowd with the same poise and determination she had shown that fateful day. "This is not just about me," she began. "It's about every individual who has faced injustice and every community that has been let down by those sworn to protect them. Change is possible, but it requires all of us to demand better, not just today but every day." Her words were met with applause, and for the first time in days she felt a glimmer of hope. As Sheriff Walker awaited the results of the investigation, he began to confront the biases that had shaped his actions. He attended mandatory training sessions and participated in discussions about systemic racism and police accountability. While his career hung in the balance, he realized that his journey toward understanding was just beginning. For Judge Johnson, life returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of that day stayed with her. It became a driving force in her mission to reform the justice system, ensuring that no one else would have to endure what she did. The courthouse steps, once a place of conflict, became a symbol of progress. And as the sun set over the city, it was clear that while the road to justice was long, each step forward brought hope for a brighter future. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about justice and accountability.